when it comes to this book, I rated it a 4 out of 5, and on my Goodreads review, I said that it was a white woman's version of Kindred. I don't think I'm fully wrong in that opinion, though. Okay, hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Mex here. Now, I will say, I technically was not going to be making a video about Yesteryear, like at all. That was not my original intention when it came to reading Yesteryear. It's just, after I finished the book, I finished it on Friday, and I was like, wow, so much shit happened in that book. I was like, yeah, no, I gotta talk about it. Like, I actually do have to talk about it. That's how we're outside. Look, I'm using my shed as a backdrop. Isn't that perfect for the concept that this book addresses? So, what exactly is Yesteryear? So, Yesteryear is a book by Carol Burr Burke. Her name is a bit of a twister for me, so forgive me. And the book's entire premise is basically this trad wife influencer gets transported back to the 19th century and now has to live the life that she keeps promoting on social media. And there's a lot of topics that are discussed within the book. Some of the heavy hitters are the performance of femininity, misogyny, I would say also religious trauma or religious performance as well, motherhood, patriarchal systems. There's also a little bit of white nationalism, though I don't think that's fully addressed. Surprisingly, though, internalized homophobia is honestly a bit more addressed than the white nationalism, which we're gonna get into. When it comes to this book, there was like a lot of well, I guess not controversies, but there were a lot of like problematic aspects that people didn't like. The biggest thing that I found the funniest is that what people didn't like about this book is that our protagonist, Natalie, is an unlikable character. But I think her being unlikable is like just the entire point of the fucking book. You know, like the bitch ain't supposed to be likable, okay? She's a fucking white nationalist misogynist. Like, what the fuck made you guys think that this girl was gonna be any likable character? I do think there are times where she is vulnerable and we can invoke like a type of sympathy for her, not empathy, sympathy. I pity that bitch. But in other aspects, I will. Oh shit! Sorry, y'all. That's my dog. Oops. My doggy. Say hi. What's going on with your eyes? Damn it! Did you? She keeps rooting up in like this grass that she's allergic in, and then oh no, let's not do that. You know I don't like that kissing stuff. Stop that. No. I don't like that kissing stuff. I'll give you a hug. Yes, there we go. Get a hug. Yes. Okay, off you go to the home. She's probably gonna just stand there for the rest of the time, so it's whatever. But where was I again? Yeah, like she's a white nationalist, guys. Why are we expecting her to be a nice person? Like, let's be real here. Let's be really real with ourselves here. Another issue that people didn't like, and I think a lot of people were calling out, is that they felt that this book was ballerina farm snark. So if you're not on the internet, good for you. And if you don't know what a trad wife is, good for you as well. But a trad wife is basically a woman who gets online and basically talks about being a traditional woman. Like, you know, not working a job, you know, being there for your man, being a mother, staying home, cooking bread, you know, like all types of things that like traditional women back in the day would do. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, that doesn't seem like too bad, until you get to the problematic aspect, which is many of these women peddle conspiracy theories, medical misinformation, scientific misinformation, and are incredibly misogynistic or have very misogynistic viewpoints that like women shouldn't do anything but stay in the kitchen basically. And many people call out that trad wives are very hypocritical, because it's like you're talking about how your man should be the main provider, but this TikTok account that you have technically is probably bringing in more money than whatever your husband's doing. Like, look at Nara Smith. I mean, Nara Smith's husband, you know, he does modeling work, and Nara used to do modeling work as well, but her TikTok account's probably making some of the most money in the family right now. And the same thing goes with Ballerina Farm and a whole bunch of other trad wives that are on social media. I think what the author did is she definitely used Ballerina Farm as like an inspiration for it. Like, yeah, there's this farmland that's all the way in like the, real rural countryside of like some Pacific Northwest state. In the book, it's in Idaho for Ballerina Farm. I'm pretty sure she's in Utah because she is a Mormon. So she's in Mormon country for real, for real. But I see the similarities, especially when it comes to the amount of kids that she has, using appliances that are supposed to look old fashioned but are actually pretty modern and like cost like a lot of money. Marrying a guy who has a very rich family, because our protagonist Natalie married a guy named Caleb, who is the youngest son of like this really wealthy guy who owns like a vineyard, and he's constantly trying to run for president. Is a whole thing that we're going to get into very, very soon. Also, the whole, because Ballerina Farm used to go to Juilliard, and she was studying ballet, which is why it's called Ballerina Farms. So she went to Juilliard. I'm pretty sure she graduated, and then she got married with her husband, and then went and made that little farm and started her TikTok account. So I do think she uses the aesthetics and some of the story of Ballerina Farm, but I do think that when it comes to Natalie as a character, it's supposed to be a bit more reminiscent of Ruby Frank, because this book also touches using kids for social media content. And there are certain aspects of the book where once we get later into it, you'll start to see what I mean with Ruby Frank. And if you don't know who Ruby Frank is, she was a mommy blogger where she would basically make an entire YouTube channel which was all about like, oh yeah, like this is what I do as a mom with all of these kids. And her two eldest kids, her eldest daughter made a book about her experience living with her mom and being used to like film content. And then her son also has like a TikTok account. He doesn't really talk much about it. He just makes jokes about like what his mom used to do, and like he just makes a bunch of comedy videos, so he's not like as like reporting on it as much of his sister does. But I think it's still interesting how both of these siblings work around like being used for like social media stuff. And if you didn't know, she went to jail because like of child abuse issues. And also another aspect which we'll get into later on, we will. But I guess we should finally start the video because, well, I guess not start, but we should actually get into the book itself. So the book is divided up into 3 parts. So you have the first part, which is the present, right? And this is like the events that happened just before Natalie ends up in the past. Then after that, you have the past. And in the past, we cut between 2 different POVs, the pioneer times and then Natalie's time from when she was 18 all the way up until she turned 30. After that, we have the final section, which is the future, which is when we basically get back into like the modern time. Okay, where was I? So let's start from the very beginning. So chapter 1, the basic chapter before we get into all the bullshit that happens. In the very beginning, we basically get a look into Natalie's like perfect life, okay? She's 6 months pregnant with her next baby, Mary. Her kids are all there. She has 2 nannies that help with homeschooling and just keeping everything together while she films videos on TikTok or Instagram, whatever social media she's on. And then her husband, Caleb, he works the farm. She has a producer named Shannon. And it seems really nice and idealistic. After they finish filming, she goes to Target with her daughters. Only her daughters, not her sons. And she meets her old high school classmate, Vanessa. Now, what do you need to know about Natalie? Natalie grew up in one of those very old school, like small town evangelical towns. Granted, they don't really specify which denomination of Christianity that Natalie is a part of. Like, they never specify which one specifically she falls into, but based off the information we can get, it's very obvious it has to be some type of evangelical Christianity. They don't go into specifics about which one it is, but it definitely seems to fall into evangelical Christianity based on some of the things that they believe and some of the aspects that go around. And many people who have grown up in these types of communities have said that like Natalie's mindset is very accurate to like how some of these women actually do believe. They are literally like raised up from from birth from the church to basically think that women's only purpose is to have kids and do the dishes, and that men can't do anything but work, and that there is nothing else that they can possibly do. And so Vanessa was one of the more, probably liberal girls in the neighborhood. She went to college, she did this, she did that. And, Natalie sees her, gets all, weird. And I mean, I guess not weird, but there's a scene where she specifically talks about Vanessa, her previous roommate. I mean, not her previous roommate, her previous high school classmate. And I found the scene very interesting because the minute I heard her talk, I was like, this is weirdly homoerotic, because she basically talks about like, oh yeah, Vanessa would love to come to my farm and she would love to bake bread with me and we would have a pseudo-sexual, and I'm just like, pseudo-sexual? Why are you having a sexual fantasy about baking bread with a woman while all your children play around? Why would you think of that in a sexual way, Natalie? Why would you? Well, we'll find that out later. After that little trip to Target, it happens throughout the book where there's like an italics portion, which are Natalie's like inner monologues, like what she really thinks about people, and as opposed to like the identity and performance that she puts on in her community, which is a very important part of the book as well. Like, that's another theme that shows up in the book, and I find it a little bit funny because there's a little twist at that at the end. But her eldest daughter, her name is Clementine, so she has at this point like 5 kids going on her 6th. So her first daughter, her name is Clementine. Then she has a son whose name is, what is it, James? It's James, and then there's Stetson, but I forgot which one came first, if it was James or was Stetson. Let's just combine the two together. You have James and Stetson, those are her sons. Then there is Jessa, and then finally Junebug. Junebug, crazy name to give a kid, but okay. But Clementine basically says that she doesn't really want to be in her mom's video, she doesn't want to be recorded anymore, and that she doesn't, like being recorded. And then, not Clementine, Natalie's just like, okay, sure. And then she's thinking in the back of her head, what the fuck, what's going on? Like, she's never had this issue before. Now, this is where shit hits the fan. Shannon, her producer, sends her an email stating, hey, I'm leaving, I'm quitting, I can't do this anymore. And Shannon is a very young producer. She basically started working with her when she was 19 and then left at 21. So Shannon was very young in comparison to Natalie, which, yeah, that's gonna have some drawbacks later on, believe you me. And once that goes through, immediately afterwards, there is an article posted about assault allegations on the farm Yesteryear. That's the name of the ranch, Yesteryear Ranch, just like the book. And of course, as the audience, our first thought is, oh my God, Caleb did something. And even, Natalie says it too. She's just like, yeah, my idiot husband having a relationship with our producer. And it's like, uh-oh, a 30-year-old man having relations with a very young 20-year-old? That's not good. And then immediately afterwards, that's when we end up in the past. So Natalie, she wakes up in the past. She's like confused as hell. She's like, what the hell is going on? Her body hurts, everything hurts. She's confused. There's no toilet, there's no electricity, there's no this. It's cold as hell. Their bed is basic as fuck. The house doesn't look like how it's supposed to look. That's something that is talked about a lot. She's just like, this house, it looks like my house, but it's not my house. It looks like more dingy and grummy. And then the children that show up look like her children, but they're not really her children. So you have a girl named Mary, but the thing is, that was going to be the name of her 6th kid, but her kid, be careful with the shaking, it's just my dog, she's walking by the camera. But Mary was going to be her next born daughter until, and then that's another thing too. She is supposedly in the past, but for some reason she's no longer pregnant. So it kind of makes you think to yourself, like, what is this? Is this like an alternate reality? Is this some sort of TV show? If it's a TV show, then how the hell is she no longer pregnant? That doesn't really make sense. And then you have these kids that she constantly says kind of look like her previous kids, but they aren't in certain ways. Like Mary looks a bit like her, but not completely. She doesn't look like Clementine, and she doesn't look fully like her, like Natalie, but she definitely has those resemblances. Same thing goes with the two sons. One of them is named Noah. Yeah, one is named Noah and the other is named Abel. And then finally you have the youngest, which is named Maeve. She's very sweet, very cute. She's just like, oh yeah, mama, I love you, mama, this, that, and the other. Very sweet. She has the mindset of a 4-year-old. Let's just say that. And then we get to Caleb, her husband, who looks old. She says that. She's just like, yeah, this looks like Caleb, but he looks like way older. I don't know what the hell is going on. So now she is fixated on trying to escape, but every time she tries to escape, it never works out well. One example of this is when she tries to escape the first time, she ends up running into the woods and ends up getting her foot trapped in a bear trap. Yes, she got her foot trapped in a bear trap, and then she has to be carried back into the cabin. And then Mary, keep in mind that Mary is like, I'm pretty sure anywhere between 12 to 14 years old, like she's a teenager basically, has to stitch up her leg with like thin ass rope to keep her from bleeding out. And when I tell you this is going to be a lot more insidious when we get to the twist is going to fuck you up. I'm so serious. Like, that twist was crazy as fucking hell. But I digress. After we get into that part, we go to the next part, which is, again, Natalie's life from when she turned 18 all the way until she turned 30, which I'll go in and out depending on when I think it's important. But so we start when Natalie is 18. Natalie is 18 and she gets accepted to go to Harvard University. Harvard. And my one question throughout this book is, how the hell did Natalie manage to get accepted into Harvard? Because this bitch stupid as fuck. It's not even just in the sense where it's like, oh my god, like she just has like a very conservative mindset. Like it's not even just that when it comes to Natalie. It's the fact that Natalie just believes really dumb shit that makes me wonder, how did homegirl possibly pass her classes when this is the shit she believes? Like, she believes in some really questionable shit. So she gets to Harvard. Many of these girls are pretty intelligent and very liberal, as she likes to say. You know, they don't like womanhood, they don't like their mothers, they don't like this, they don't like that, and she's just like not really fucking with it. And many of the girls kind of make fun of her because it's like, this girl dresses like she's fucking Amish. She dresses like she's Amish, she acts like she's better than everyone else, and that's why a lot of the girls don't really fuck with her. In fact, Natalie is known to not have many friends. Natalie even says so herself. Like, in comparison to like her mother and her sister, she just, I'm sorry, I don't know what that was, but in comparison to her mother and her sister, she just isn't super social. She never discusses having like any type of friends. She never talks about like anyone else besides her mother and her sister. So it makes it seem as if this girl probably got nobody else but her mother and sister, and like she doesn't really have friends at all. She's just not a social person. She very much struggles with being social and being nice to people, honestly. And that's something that even her mother says later on in the book, where she's just like, oh my god, like, what is your problem? Like, why can't you ever be nice? It seems as if this has been a problem for Natalie's entire life, where she is just not a nice or kind person to be around. She can't even fake being nice properly. And I like how it's brought up multiple times in the book. Like, every time she smiles, it kind of creeps people out because it's not like an actual full genuine smile. It's a very obvious fake smile that she is not able to perfect. Like, it's not even just like a, oh well, we all pretend thing, but it's like she's pretending and makes it really, really obvious that she's pretending. Like, she doesn't make it seem like at least a little bit genuine, which I found very interesting. So one character that shows up a lot is the character Rena, which was her former college roommate. Throughout the book, Natalie will constantly talk about like, oh, I bet Rena is doing this, I bet Rena is doing that. Like, she puts a lot of focus on like these liberal women who work and do this and do that and don't live a traditional like womanly lifestyle. Which you find kind of funny because it's like, you know, you talk about how much you hate these liberal women, and yet you're constantly bringing them up. Like, constantly bringing them up when you really don't need to. And it really doesn't make sense as to why you're doing that. As if you're obsessed with them. As if you want their validation or some sense of validation from them or want to be close to them. Either way, Natalie says some whack ass shit to Rena. I guess one day because she's like kind of sick of it, and she's just like, yeah, like, just because you don't love your mother doesn't mean that I don't love my mother. And then Rena beats the shit out of her because really, truthfully, how could you not? And again, many reasons why I don't understand how Natalie made it to Harvard is that this girl argued with a Harvard biology professor, okay? A Harvard biology professor that men cannot do domestic labor, that they are biologically wired to not be able to take care of kids or do anything that comes to caring for children. Which is the stupidest thing you've ever heard in your entire life. Like, to say that a man doesn't know how to take care of their kids is like fucking crazy. I mean, many men might skirk the responsibility onto women, but men can take care of their kids. Like, my dad took care of me. Like, you think my dad was just like, he would send money, yeah, like he was definitely helping out to provide, but he also took care of me. Like, this whole, she's very much into like, yeah, men are biologically wired to provide. They cannot take care of men taking care of children is just not possible. And it's very, very interesting. It's a very, very interesting mindset that she has. While she's at Harvard, she meets Caleb, the youngest son of his political father. He's a businessman. He's this, that, and the other. You could basically think of him as like a more competent version of Trump in a sense, because he uses many of the talking points that Trump does. But they meet at Harvard in one of the Christian groups, right? And things get wild because Natalie and Caleb go on a date. They go on 3 dates, right? When they're 18 through 19. And then they immediately get married. Like, just off the rip. Yeah, let's get married. Like, let's just get married. Let's not try and have like at least one more date. Let's not try and finish school. Let's just get married and call it a fucking day. And I think what's really interesting too is that Caleb is also much older than Natalie is. And I always tend to forget that because Natalie is around 18 to 19 during this point when she's in Harvard, as opposed to Caleb, who is about to graduate Harvard, which means he is like 22 going on 23, which is, it's not the worst age gap that can happen in these types of relationships, like these very traditional Christian relationships, but it's definitely a very questionable one. It's like, she's 18, you're 22, this girl is freshly out of high school, your ass has been in college for 4 years. You don't think that's a little strange? I mean, I don't know, but that's the case. So they get married. It's a nice little wedding. And even her mother is a bit concerned because her mother, while a traditional feminine woman who's just like, yeah, women's responsibility is this, that, and the other. We got to save the white race. There's a lot of tidbits about white nationality, but I want to get into my issues with how they tackle the white nationality part in a minute. But, she always brings up like, hey, because she was a businesswoman. Like, even though her mother, was a more traditional woman, she definitely had her more liberal processes. For example, her mother was a single mom, basically. Their dad left them at a pretty young age because of cheating or something like that, and he left them at a very early age, so that left their mother to like pull up her panties and make sure her kids are provided for. That was an avocado. Okay. And make sure that the kids are provided for. So she did like a whole business, and she was basically, that's how she made money to keep the kids together. And of course there was like gossip and news about how the mother didn't remarry, how she didn't do this, how she didn't do that, and how she was a bad Christian woman. And I really do like how the book talks about like this performance of femininity, especially within Christian conservative spaces, because they really do have these white women performing like it's a fucking circus. Like, you need to make sure that you have your makeup all done, you got to make sure that you do this, you got to make sure that you do that, and make sure that you smile like just bright enough where it looks nice, but not too bright because it might make you look too friendly and like you're faking it. Like, all of these like little things, like, don't be like bragging that you got a big ring. Just say, oh, well, you know, I wanted something smaller. You know, don't make it seem like you want something, you know, showy. Pretend like you didn't want something showy, but you're grateful that you got something showy because that's what you really wanted. Like those types of backhanded ways of talking, like, oh yeah, you got to just make sure that you sound grateful even though, you know, it's this, that, or the other. And it's so, I really don't know how to explain it, but it's such a way of like thinking because I was raised Catholic. Well, I guess not super raised Catholic. Like, my mom wasn't a strict Catholic, but you know, our family's Catholic. We live in the Caribbean. We're black. Like, we're not like white conservatives who lived in like the boonies of America. Like, we live in a U.S. territory. We have a combination of our own culture. So I was always just reading this, and it's like I knew that this is how a lot of like white Christian conservative women act, but I didn't know it was like this bad. Like, it was really, really bad. Very interesting mindset to look into because it's like, wow, like there really are women in America that like think like this, like think like Natalie thinks, with like no disregard for it. And I found that so interesting. But her mother basically brings up, she's just like, listen, are you sure that you want to like do something like this? Because being like a sole provider, like basically giving up any autonomy that you have, like not having your own money, not having your own this, not having your own that, like, are you really sure you want to go? But Natalie, she decides to go with it. The wedding happens, everything seems okay, then it's time for them to have sex for the first time, which is the big reason why they even got married so early. The reason a lot of these like conservatives people get married so early on is because many of them do not believe in sex before marriage. They are very much in the mentality of like, oh, well, like the Bible says you shouldn't have sex before you get married. And because they don't want to have sex before they get married, but they still want to have sex, the proposition is basically get married as young as humanly possible and then you can have sex, which isn't a great way to go about it because do you really want to be tied to someone whose dick can't get hard? Because that's what happened to Natalie. That man had the limpest of dicks. Like the limpest of dicks. Like, she literally talks about it too, where it's like, yeah, it's just like semi-hard. Like, it is not erect in the slightest. I'm like, damn, that's crazy. That's really, really crazy. Then she has her first child, Clementine. Something that the book discusses that I feel like doesn't get talked about the most is that Natalie suffers from not just postpartum depression, but also it seems like postpartum psychosis as well. Now, my mom, I was very lucky to have a mom who was very open about how she had postpartum depression and told me that if I were to ever have kids and I felt like this way when it comes to having kids, like when it comes to postpartum, a lot of thoughts that women have when they have postpartum depression is basically, this kid doesn't feel like it's my kid. I don't have any connection to this kid. I hate this kid. And sometimes postpartum depression can get so bad where the woman might try to kill the baby because it's so depressing. Like, they start going into a whole ass psychosis. I would say that like Natalie teeters a line between psychosis and also depression because she kind of feels as if her baby is like alien to her. Like, Clementine doesn't feel like it's hers. It just feels like it's something that's supposed to be hers that she doesn't feel is actually hers. So it does seem like Natalie is going between both a postpartum psychosis and a postpartum depression, which is very alarming. When she first gives birth to Clementine, she literally tells her mother this, and there's a nurse in the room as well. And she tells her mother this, and her mother's just like, oh no, that's normal. And then the nurse, she butts in and she's just like, no, it's not. It sounds like she has postpartum. I think we should get, and then her mother is very quick to call her off and say, no, she just needs to go on a run. And it's just like, lady, your daughter just gave birth less than a few hours ago. She cannot go running. And the nurse even tells her that too. She's just like, she just gave birth. She cannot run. She cannot walk. But guess what? She does do that. She does make this woman run. I mean, I guess not run, but like jog. And then by the time the jog is over, she literally splits her stitches and she's bleeding and she's in so much pain. And it really does make you wonder how much shit could have been avoided if Natalie's mom had just let her get the fucking therapy. But this is a tragedy of one's own making, so we just got to continue onward. Going back to the past, we get more instances of like what exactly is going on. For example, in one scene when Natalie is talking with Mary, because Mary is like been horrifically parentified, it seems as if Natalie has these moods often. So it seems like, okay, is this like a switching of consciousness situation where basically she's gone from being who this woman used to be versus the Natalie that we know in like the future. So it's like, okay, is this some sort of like weird conscience swapping to a different timeline as opposed to just regular time travel? Who's to really say? But it seems like Natalie has these moves that happen often, and they're just like, yeah, you always have these moves and you're always doing this, and we need you to get your shit together. At least that's what Mary tells her. Mary's just straight up about like, yeah, you need to get your fucking shit together, bitch. And it's a little bit funny, honestly, but throughout the book she's like trying to figure out a way to escape, trying to understand like, okay, what the hell is going on? And she's always walking around the property. She's not able to really walk around much because most of the book, you know, like I said, her leg got caught in a bear trap. So she has very limited mobility. She has to walk with a stick and walk with a cane, and it makes things really hard for her. So at one point, when she's like getting some eggs from the chickens with Maeve, she, and I kid you not, finds plastic, which immediately like clues her into like, okay, what the fuck is going on? Because it's like, how is there plastic here? So it starts making you think, okay, is this some sort of weird reality TV show? If it's a reality TV show, then what exactly is going on here? Like, why use this type of premise? What's going on? Why not call some sort of emergency vehicle because Natalie got herself injured? Why even have an actual bear trap there? It really makes you think to yourself, like, what the hell's going on? Has she been kidnapped? Has she been this? Has she been that? Like, you're just questioning, like, what the hell is going on? Why the hell is this happening? Then, back to the past. Now, Clementine is starting to get a little bit older, but the issue is that Caleb doesn't want to find a job. So right now, Natalie is living with her mother and Caleb's living with them too. Caleb has just graduated from Harvard University. You would think that this man is trying to find a job, especially considering that this is like the early 2010s at this point. So honestly, it probably wouldn't have been that hard for him to find a job. Like, compared to this job market that we have right now in 2026, the dude could have easily found a good paying job, but he's choosing not to. Natalie is constantly showing him listings for different jobs, and he is just not, like, you know, bucking up. And also, Natalie is having issues with taking care of Clementine. She feels like she's basically in a rut, like she's just circling through a constant samsara. Like, all it is like, I sleep, I feed the baby, I take care of the baby, I give my husband job postings, I go to sleep, I do this, I do this, I do this. She just feels like she is like in this constant cycle that she can't break out of. And she's trying to tell her mother this, and her mother is just like, oh, well, you know what I do to make sure that I like am able to perform the way I'm supposed to? Because Natalie talks a lot about how tired she is, like how she doesn't like being a mother, and there, like, when she gave birth to her daughter, it's like everything started to click into place for her, where she's just like, this motherhood shit is just not it. It's not it at all. Like, her husband sucks. Her husband is incompetent. I would say that Caleb is maliciously incompetent. And I mean maliciously. Once we get to that twist, you'll see exactly what I mean. This man is maliciously incompetent. So, Natalie's sister visits her, and her sister has already had like 2 kids at this point. And her sister is like, you know, I get it. It's like really, really hard, but you know, it's okay. You're gonna like get through this. Like, her sister's actually trying to be like really nice and help her out just for the sake of being nice and being kind because that's her fucking sister. But Natalie just acts like a fucking bitch to her. She's just like, well, that's what we're meant to do. Okay, that's what we're meant to do. Like, we're women, that's what we're meant to do. And Natalie's just like, listen, me and my husband have been having some issues. And even Natalie has stated this before, where she felt like, her husband, her sister's husband, Abigail's husband, was a fucking dick. The dude is not a good husband at all. In fact, it seems like he has been physically abusing her as well. And so her sister is just like, I've been thinking about getting birth control because I don't think I can have another child with him. It's already been really, really hard on us. And then Natalie like quickly snaps at her sister. She's just like, no, you can't do that. Okay, you're a wife, you're a mother, that's your responsibility, that's your job. You can't keep lies from your husband, you can't keep this from your husband. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, just lashes out at her sister, even though her sister is just like trying to bond with her and trying to have, you know, a relationship with her, trying to show her like, hey, maybe the way that we do things is a little bit problematic and there might be ways to resolve those. But Natalie does not want to hear that shit in the slightest. So Abigail leaves, and you know, homegirl is still struggling. And that's when her mother gives her that advice of like, well, you know what I do to make sure that I can stop looking tired and keep going forward? I pretend that there are people watching me. Because the best way to make sure you do a good job in life is by pretending that you're being constantly watched. That definitely won't lead to any type of paranoia or schizophrenia later on in the line. Definitely not. But that's the advice that Natalie's mom gives her very vulnerable daughter that's showing very obvious signs of postpartum psychosis. That definitely won't go wrong. Anyway, now after a while, Natalie calls her husband's family because it's like, listen, if I can get my husband to get his shit together, hopefully his parents can help him get his shit together. So they go over to California where they have all of their, beautiful vineyards. It's a bunch of Mexicans who work the fields to make sure they get their wine. It's this big, like, McMansion type building. And they stay there for quite a few months. And at a certain point, he's still refusing to get a job. Like, at this point, it's not even just like, oh, he doesn't know what to do. The dude's just choosing not to get a job, which is just like, dude, you can't be serious at this point. Like, I get it, like, not understanding what you want to do, which is like, I don't really understand that. You're 22 years old, Caleb. You've been going to university for 4 years at Harvard. At no point did you ever think to yourself, maybe I should, like, buckle down and think about what I really want to do. You had 4 whole years to think about what you wanted to do. Even less time back when you were in high school. Like, I'm just saying, you had a 4-year head start to figure out what you do, and you waited until you got into college, until you graduated to, like, be like, yeah, I don't really know what I want to do. Like, at least get a placeholder job. And even his dad is trying to get him a placeholder job too. He's just like, yeah, I'm trying to find him a job, this, that, and the other, like, just a simple job that can help him out while I'm trying to run for office. So Natalie is still struggling, like, still stuck in the cycle, still feeling tired, suffering from very obvious postpartum. She is not connecting with her baby at all. And, Caleb's mother comes up to her and she's just like, oh, you look a little tired, which is basically like backhanded speak for like, oh, get your shit together, like, actually look presentable, like, you're a woman, you're not supposed to look tired, you're supposed to look perfect. And literally gives her like pills. And it turns out that this is what this woman has been using. Like, oh yeah, I use these pills all the time. And it's like, damn, this is like some real 1950s housewife shit. And Caleb talks about how he wants to be a kindergarten teacher. Now, Natalie snaps at this because to her, being a kindergarten teacher is a woman job, not a man job. And she's just like, I don't want my husband to be working a feminine job like that. And so she basically starts Caleb down under this conspiracy theory rabbit hole where she was basically just like, oh no, you don't want to be a kindergarten teacher, because like she's trying to manipulate him to not be a kindergarten teacher. And she's just like, I don't know if you want to be a kindergarten teacher. I mean, do you know all the things that they're teaching our children? And he's just like, oh, what are they teaching our children? And she's just like, you know that they're teaching children that slavery is bad and they want white people to feel guilty for slavery? And he's just like, but that was 100 years ago. And that's what I wanted to talk about when it comes to the white nationalism in this book. When it comes to the white nationalism that shows up within this book, it's very lackluster. It's like the author keeps putting in portions where Natalie, mentions her being a white nationalist or has these ideas of white nationalism. Like the way she talks about Mexicans, the way she talks about black people, the way that she talks about the white race, because she constantly talks about how like the white race is dying out and that there's going to be a civil war at some point, like some sort of race war. Basically, it's supposed to be like race war speak, but not actually saying race war. Instead, they constantly use civil war, which is like, I feel like the author is white, so I guess I can't be too sharp, but it's like, I feel like it was the author holding back her punches. Like, no honey, it's not a civil war, say what it is. Race war. These people want a race war. That's what they keep saying. They're not saying civil, they want a race war. You're describing a race war. That's what they want, a race war. But I digress. But that was my one issue with the book. That's why I had to give it 4 stars, because to me it's like, you can't be dropping hints for white nationalism after going through all this other topics and like doing a pretty decent job. I mean, I feel like she could have gone more in depth, but like, you can't go through all these other topics and then, also mention the whole fact of like, oh yeah, there's a little white nationalism in there that we don't really address, but it's no problem. There's also another aspect I want to get into, which is the I would say, white women's pretend domestic labor. So constantly throughout the story, whenever we go to the past, it basically talks about like, oh yeah, white women, they used to toll the fields and bake the bread and do the this. Is it obvious that I didn't have a script for this? Because I didn't. I just finished the book a few days ago. I wasn't making this video, but then I had to talk about the book because there was so much shit going on. So time progresses, and basically Natalie has manipulated her husband well enough, and now all he does is like stay on like online forums. He looks at misinformation on YouTube. He goes on Reddit. He does this. He does that. He basically has fallen into a whole conspiracy theory rabbit hole. And now, on their first date, Natalie had mentioned how she wanted to live on a farm. And so now Caleb has this whole idea of how he wants to be a cowboy. And she's just like, okay, you know what? Kindergarten teacher, I can't do that shit, but I can try and understand being a cowboy. So she goes to Doug, their rich father-in-law, and she's just like, listen, Caleb wants a farm. There's a farm in Idaho that's close to where my family is. Why don't you buy it for us? And then, you know, I'll make Caleb into the manly man that you always want him to be. Because this was a discussion that she had with her parents-in-law, where they basically talked about like, listen, we knew that Caleb was a little bit stupid, but it's really bad, and we were really hoping that as his wife he would like get his shit together. Really just showing like just how much like labor is put on women, whether it be their husbands, their children, or whatever. Like the work is always going to be put on these women. And so she was just like, okay, I'm gonna lock the fuck in. They buy the farm, and that's when the Yesteryear rant starts. Now, granted, they weren't originally doing like a social media thing until a bit later on. Originally, the plan was just that they were going to have a farm, you know, make raw milk and raw cheese, sell their own eggs, sell their own vegetables, sell their own plants and everything. Come to find out, they have no idea what they're doing. At all. None of them took any type of agriculture or horticulture classes. None of them really knew what was going into it. Like, it was very obvious, like, these were people who thought that agriculture was like some easy thing, but there's a reason why agriculture is a college major that takes 4 years. Agricultural science is no joke. No joke at all. Multiple times in the book, their plans completely fail. Like they completely fail out. Also, the dude buys a cow. He buys animals like chickens and a cow really early into the process, which makes no sense because it's like, you guys can't even grow plants yet. What makes you think you can raise animals? And he's in a subreddit full of farmers, and even these farmers like get on his case about this. They're just like, dude, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, they're constantly just saying like they basically run him out of the farmer subreddit because they were like, dude, what the hell are you talking about? Why would you buy chickens, and why would you buy a cow? Why would you buy a whole bovine when you can barely plant regular vegetables? And they're just like, you're gonna get her sick. You're going to mess her up. And that's exactly what happens. The cow dies and all of the chickens die. Because of course, these people don't even know how to grow regular vegetables, and they thought they were gonna be able to read living stock, like farm animals. Like, that's like the hardest part of having a farm, which is like actually raising the farm animals. And they thought that they were going to be able to do that shit. At this point, I'm pretty sure they're on their third kid at this point in the present. And it's like, they are so fucked. Like, they're actually blowing through their money at this point. Her sister Abigail is on their like fifth kid. And she basically just announces to her mother and her sister like, hey, I'm going to basically divorce her husband. Like, Abigail basically just says, I'm gonna get divorced. And then again, Natalie is very much on her sister's case because she sees her sister as like a sinner in a sense. She is constantly telling her sister like, oh my god, like, you can't do that, you can't divorce him, that's ungodly, that's sinful, that's not right, you can't get a divorce, that's against the religion, that's against everything, what is your children gonna do? And then she gets really mean at her sister. She's just like, you barely graduated high school, okay? You don't even have a high school diploma. What are you gonna do? Work at a fucking supermarket? Live with mom? You have 5 kids with him. He's gonna take your ass to court. What are you going to do? You can't do shit. And then her sister literally starts crying because not only is it just a stressful situation where and even Natalie brings up the fact about like, oh yeah, I bet he beats you. And it's like, girl, what is your fucking problem? That's your fucking sister. No wonder your mother snapped back at you at the end about like, oh, well, this, that, and the other. Like, this is why, like, why can't you be kind? Why is it so hard for you to be kind? And it's like, genuinely, what is it so hard for you to be kind? Like, her mother, her mother has her flaws like any mother, but it's like her mother still seems like a very genuine, nice person. So it's like, genuinely, how the fuck did you end up like this? Like, what the fuck is your problem, for real, for real? But yeah, they're blowing through that $5 million that they got, which is like, damn, how'd you blow through $5 million that quickly? Like, you guys really did not think this through. It isn't until one day that basically the social media influencer, this YouTuber basically says, you see, this is what these women need to be doing. This is what these social media accounts need to be showing. Women who bake bread, women that do this, women who don't have microwaves because it causes cancer. But the thing is, Natalie does have a microwave. Natalie has just built her home to make it look as if she's living in that old-timey lifestyle when she doesn't. She just hides it so that nobody can see that she has, all these different types of materials. She's lying. She is blatantly lying. She has immigrants who help with the farm work that she barely pays because they're immigrants. She has a nanny. She has 2 nannies that help with homeschooling and raising the children because she's so busy doing the social media stuff. She has pesticides, even though she tells people that her farm stuff are completely organic. All of her stuff is actually made in China and not in America, like she supposedly tells people. And, her husband is utterly incompetent, and they have run through so many dairy cows, okay? Keep in mind that in America, if you're going to own farmland or own animals, that you have to get them registered. And not only that, whenever an animal dies, basically you got 2 options. Either you can have the animal turn into something else, or the animal gets turned into fertilizer. But either way, you got to go through the state. The state recognizes that that animal for you died, and then basically they take care of the animal. But if they get too many livestock from you that have died, they have to investigate your farm to figure out like what is going on, like what are the working conditions when it comes to these types of farm that you're holding. Because if you're going through like 4 dairy cows in the span of 2 years, that's suspicious. That's weird. You're not supposed to have that many dairy cows die within that quick of a span. So they're gonna like send somebody out to check your farm and figure out what the hell is going on. Why are your animals dying? And the way they get around doing this is by hiring immigrants and, giving immigrants money so that they take care of it by just burning it instead of like having it made into fertilizer, because then it would be, checked in by the government, and then they would get their shit rocked by the government. So after that little clip goes viral and she gets mentioned by that YouTube channel, her page skyrockets. Like, and when I mean skyrockets, I mean skyrockets. From going from like 3,000 followers to now going to 1 million followers, which super, super quick, honestly, just for like the content that was happening. Throughout this time in the present, she gets more and more popular. She gets more and more help. And, she does ask for that, nanny. Originally, there was no nanny, but then she had to, like, ask Caleb. And Caleb was like, as a mother, this is your responsibility, like, we shouldn't have a nanny. You shouldn't need a nanny. And she's just like, well, I need the help. And then he's just like, okay, well, we can't get a nanny, but we can get, like, a full-time babysitter, which is just, like, you see how conservatives always try to find a loophole when they know that they actually need the help? It's just really funny to me. Like, it's very funny to see that. At least to me, personally. But going back to the past, finally, people come. So outside of that plastic thing, 2 people come. Throughout the time of this, like, story, it's like nobody else has come to this ranch or to this home at all. And then all of a sudden, 2 guys come. And these 2 guys look kind of familiar to Natalie, but she can't figure out how they look similar. So these guys, they basically see, Natalie, and they're helping Caleb with the fencing, and then they stay for dinner. And it's something, I won't lie. Oh, there's also a scene that happened with Mary where Mary went to go and pick saffron, and that clued me into something. I was just like, saffron? You live in Idaho. I don't know if you know this, but saffron isn't really a plant that can grow super well in the wild. Now, if you live in Idaho and you're trying to make your own saffron plant, that's completely different. You can plant it. But looking for saffron in the woods of Idaho, Saffron does not show up in the woods of Idaho, which I was just like, how are you gonna find saffron in Idaho? So she goes to go and find saffron, and then she runs into something, basically something that really spooks her. And then she goes back to her mother, and her mother's just like, well, Natalie, and she's just like, what did you see out there? You're acting all weird. And she's just like, no, I'm not. I didn't see anything. I'm fine. Nothing happened at all. Now, with the dinner with these two guys, she basically just acts as like, oh, who are you really? And then the two guys just like raise their eyebrows. And then she's like telling them, oh my God, I've been kidnapped. I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm not supposed to be here. These aren't my family. These aren't my people. I don't know who these people are. And then the two guys are just like, okay. And then they just go back to eating dinner. And you probably think to yourself, Michaela, why do the two guys have that reaction? We'll get into that in a quick minute. Another thing that happens that's going to be really important is that Caleb constantly goes out to the woods and then comes back. Like, he'll go to the woods, he'll be there for like basically the entire day, and then he'll come back and eat dinner. And no one really knows what he's doing in those woods. Supposedly it's to set traps, but we don't know for sure. Back in the present is when we finally get to meet the producer, Shannon. So this is when Shannon is 19. She originally gets a job. And you can kind of tell that Shannon comes to the farm with a more ulterior motive. Like, she's not there because she actively wants to be there. She's going there because she wants a story. She wants to expose this farm for what it actually is. And on the one hand, I see where she comes from. On the other hand, I will say it's a little bit... It kind of just shows how they were cut from the same cloth. Like, don't get me wrong, like, Shannon has a bit more of like redeemable qualities, but it does show that the two of them did have their similarities, and it was some real crazy shit that goes on afterwards. So Shannon gets taken to the farm, and she gets to see the farm. She gets to live there. She's a dropout. She's trying to figure everything out for herself. And she, of course, is just like, well, wait, on your social media, you make it seem like you do all of this by yourself. Like, you make it seem as if, you work these fields by yourself, that you raise these kids by yourself, that you homeschool them by themselves. And she's just like, well, no, I just kind of give like that personality. I never officially said that. People just assume that, which is like, Natalie, come on now, be real. Be real. Okay, be a little real with yourselves here. But of course, Shannon's just like, well, it feels like you're lying to these people. Like, you're using immigrants, you're using pesticides when your food is supposed to be organic. You don't think that that's suspicious? But I guess we digress. And now is when we get into like the real crazy shit when it comes to the reveal. Another thing that I want to add in that I think was kind of interesting is how Caleb's dad, he keeps trying to run for president. That's Caleb's dad's whole thing, is he wants to run for president. But the thing is, he's so conservative that most people just don't really want to run for him or put him up there, because it's like, dude, you're like way too much of a conservative. Like, nobody fucks with you at all. Nobody likes you. Nobody likes you. So he basically uses manosphere, conspiracy theories, basically Nazi speech. He goes on stage, he does a speech, and Shannon is just like, Natalie, you don't think that this is a bit questionable, do you? And then Natalie's just like, well, it's just political theater, it's just a performance. Everyone performs. And she's just like, yeah, but you don't think that there's some truth to performance? Like, all of these people are getting inspired by these words. They don't see this as a performance. They see this as like an actual thing. And then Natalie just keeps saying, no, that's not the case. It's not that. And then Shannon becomes very aware that, Natalie don't give a fuck. The only thing she cares about is performing her femininity and making it seem as if she's the perfect, godly Christian woman. At this point, Shannon makes moves on Caleb. And I won't lie, this is one of the more badly written parts to me, because I never understood why Shannon goes after Caleb in the first place. Caleb is like 35, 34 at this point, and Natalie's like in her 30s. So to me, it's like, why the hell is Shannon, a 19, 20-year-old, trying to go after Caleb? That never made sense to me. I don't really know what the author was thinking at that point. I get it, Natalie's an unreliable narrator, but at the same time, it really doesn't make sense as to why she was doing that whole, oh, I'm gonna get closer to Caleb thing, because she actually ends up sleeping with Caleb. Like, that's how far it goes. Like, she sleeps with Caleb and Caleb gets all upset. He's just like, yeah, you know what, I don't want this shit anymore. I want to get a divorce. I want to move to New York with her. And like, she actually challenges me, you know, you just think that I'm stupid, because you are, Caleb. But he's like, you just think that I'm stupid. You know, she told me that the rat thing isn't real. Did you know that the rat thing isn't real? And, you know, Natalie's just like, yeah, I know the rat thing isn't real. Because Natalie, she's ignorant, but she's not stupid. I know that might seem like they're the same thing, but they're not. There are some ignorant, smart people out there. It seems like a double entendre, but it's not. There's many ignorant, smart people. Many ignorant, smart people, actually. But when it comes to Caleb, he's just like, yeah, and I'm gonna move to New York with Shannon. And she's just like, and you know, this sends Natalie into a tailspin, because Natalie isn't on the house. Natalie is not on the home. Only Caleb's name is on it, and that was the deal that she made with Caleb's dad, that she was not going to put her name in the home. That basically all of her finances are tied to Caleb. So if Caleb were to divorce her, she would get nothing. She gets zilch, zero. She even had like her own private saving account when the Instagram was like really getting followers, that she would like wire money into. And this is where I say that Caleb is maliciously incompetent. Like, he is maliciously incompetent, because he goes up to his wife and he's just like, hey, I've been noticing that there's been a large sum of money deposited into an account that I have no clue about. Now, Natalie tries to play this off as like, oh, well, my husband just doesn't know how to deal with money. But it's like, honey, I think we both know that that was an emergency account for you in case your husband got bored of you. We all know what it was. You don't gotta lie. I mean, don't get me wrong. She's not wrong. Caleb does buy stupid shit. The dude bought a horse when they could barely keep a cow alive. I don't know if y'all know anything about horses, but horses are notoriously hard to take care of. And very, very expensive. Horses cost so much money to keep alive, it's not even fucking funny. So him buying a horse, dumb as shit. I can completely understand her perspective of like keeping the money away from him to keep him from buying dumb shit. But also, let's be real here, honey. That was an emergency fund. You were making an emergency fund in case he decides to leave your ass. Can't blame her fully, but game recognizes game, okay? We know what you were trying to do, Natalie. But either way, he's just like, yeah, so I told him to shut down that account and to make sure they sent all that money to the actual account that I know about. Oh, so you actually are competent. You actually do know how to do something. That's interesting. That's very, very interesting, Caleb. I find that very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Truthfully. Now, before we get to like the really big reveal, there's still some stuff that we got to get into. Now, after Caleb, you know, basically talks about that, Natalie goes over to Shannon to confront her about this. And in this scene, trigger warning for sexual assault, the scene originally makes it seem as if all Natalie did was choke Shannon, because Shannon doesn't even like act sorry about it. Again, Natalie's an unreliable narrator, so we're not certain if this really was Natalie's point of view as to how it happened, but Natalie basically acts as if she doesn't care that she slept with Doug, or that, I mean, not Doug, slept with Caleb, and that, you know, she doesn't really care because, you know, Natalie, you treat Caleb like he's stupid. You treat a lot of people like they're stupid. You're very condescending. You don't treat people like they're people. You just treat them like they're things. And that's not completely wrong, because that's exactly how Natalie acts. She just acts like she's a nice person when she's not. A really interesting scene before that is that Natalie was like super tired before she got a producer, okay? Natalie basically goes out to Target to get some food. I mean, not get some food, to get some materials. So she goes to Target and she brings her baby June bug. You know, she goes through the store, goes through the aisles, and, you know, she meets a fan. Now, she meets the fan, the interaction goes okay. You can really tell how socially inept Natalie is because Natalie really does not get out much. Natalie spends basically every breathing, waking moment with her children. There is never a point in time where Natalie goes out with friends or goes to have alone time with herself or goes to do something that doesn't involve her children. Her children are with her at every step of the fucking day. That woman gets zero rest, which is gonna drive anybody crazy, okay? Like, don't get me wrong, moms love their kids, but moms need a break from their kids too, okay? Like, every mom needs to have at least 1 hour alone from their children, and Natalie does not get that at all. So she goes to the store and then she leaves, and then the lady in the store sees her again and she's just like, oh my god, I'm sorry about that. It's just, I just had my baby, and looking at your account, it really inspires me. It really makes me happy because the pregnancy was so hard. And Natalie is just like trying to be really nice about it, and then you hear a baby cry, and then you realize Natalie didn't bring her baby in the store. Like, that's the thing that got me, because I was reading the scene and I was just like, I'm surprised that no one's mentioning the baby in the cart. And then when I heard the baby, like when I read it where it says like, oh, and then there was a cry in the car, and I was like, girl, you left your baby in the car? And of course the lady was like, wait, did you just leave the baby in the car? Because she just saw this lady in the store with no baby, and then she goes to see her by the car and here's that baby. So it's like, that bitch left her baby in the car. And of course, like, Natalie tries to like play it off. It's like, oh, well, it's this, or oh, well, it's that. And it's like, Natalie, you left a 6-month-old baby in the car. She's 6 months. 6 months. Let's just say I'm surprised that didn't already get some like questionable stuff. Like, the fact that lady didn't report anything, I guess maybe she just thought that Natalie was like, really, really tired or something and decided not to report it. But I don't know. I feel like that's something that someone should be putting on social media. Like, there is no way that no one would meet someone famous like that and not say, hey, I ran into the lady who runs a super famous TikTok account. She left her baby in the car. You're telling me that nobody made any type of start post or informational post about that, but didn't happen. And that's what kind of inspired her to get Shannon. Now, going back into the past, Maeve gets sick, and no one really knows why Maeve got sick. She just got sick with something, and it's really, really bad, and they don't know what to do. Like, she's been sick for like quite a few days. The fever is really high. The fever is not breaking. So Maeve is sick. Mary and Natalie are both concerned because Natalie seems to like Maeve the most. Like, Maeve is her favorite kid. She's the sweetest heart. She's such a sweet, sweet little kid. So Mary and Natalie are, of course, concerned. Then they go to Caleb, and then Caleb's just like, oh, well, she just has a fever. She'll be fine. And then they're just like, well, she's had a fever for days now. Like, this is getting really concerning. And again, when I tell you this twist, it's really going to make you look at just how maliciously incompetent Caleb is. So Mary tells Natalie, like, okay, listen, I might have been lying to you. We only had the one trap. She was basically lying to Natalie, saying that there were more traps in the forest, but there's actually just the one trap that she tripped on and messed up. So there's no traps in the forest besides the one. So Mary basically gives her a map. She says, like, okay, listen, we have neighbors that are here. If you run, then you can find them, and they might be able to get you to a doctor or find a doctor for us. And then we'll be able to help Maeve. So that's what Natalie does. She runs into the forest to try and get help for the baby. Then we go back to the past again, where this whole thing basically happens where, of course, Shannon quits the job and she goes to the news and tells everyone, okay, well, this is what happens to us. So, of course, Natalie calls her father-in-law. She's just like, listen, the girl, she had sex with Caleb, and I hit her, like I choked her. And, Doug is just like, okay, listen, we understand. We'll get you some HR, this, that, and the other. And this is where this is a minor twist, but it's still an interesting twist. We're basically in the italics that we see throughout the series, throughout the book, where we assume that this is like her inner monologue. We actually see Doug respond to it. So that means that a lot of the time when she was having this inner dialogue, this italics that she's had, that's like supposed to be her inner monologue, might not have been her inner monologue. It was something else entirely. Like, she was actually saying some of the shit out loud. And keep in mind, this was some crazy shit that she was saying. She would be saying shit like, oh, I bet that bitch is gonna, like, just crazy shit. Just like crazy shit that she would say out loud. So she was talking that shit about Doug in her mind, but not actually. And then Doug was just like, yeah, see why I said you need a PR team? And then hangs up the phone. Then she calls her mother, and her mother basically talks about, like, well, hey, you know, I've been going to therapy. Your sister has also been going to therapy. And, you know, she's, you know, seeing this Pastor Ben. They're going to a completely different church now. They don't really discuss, like, which church directly they're going to. They just say that they're going to a different church now. I won't lie. Throughout this book, it low-key made me think to myself, damn, thank God I got put into Catholic. Like, thank goodness I got Catholicism. Like, seriously, truthfully, thank goodness. Like, I was just saying to myself, yeah, thank God, because wow, these people are crazy. But Catholicism has its issues too, I won't even lie to you. I mean, I'm writing a book about, like, Catholic stuff, so not perfect at all. But her mother just keeps telling her, like, okay, well, you know, I've been going to therapy and I have something that I need to tell you girls that I never told you. And basically, the girls have been under the impression that their dad left them because he cheated, when in actuality, it was their mother that cheated. Turns out her mother was, like, really sick of, like, how her husband would treat her. And so she ended up sleeping with his coworker, and that's why he left. And she just never told them because she couldn't live with the guilt, and that she was sorry, and that maybe if she had told them that they would end up differently. And that's where the whole, like, thing where it's like, why is it so hard for you to be kind? Like, what is your problem? Why can't you just be nice to people? And that's when she hangs up the phone on her. Then there's the actual interview that happens, and the interview is crazy because, you know, of course she revealed, like, the immigrant workers and the pesticides and the animal abuse. But what she reveals is that Natalie was the one that did the sexual assault. Like, many people were under the impression that it was Caleb. And of course, Doug and everyone else on the team was like, what the fuck? It was a woman who did it. And I actually am going to pick up my tablet and find the scene for you guys, because the thing about the scene specifically where it's revealed that it was Natalie who did the assault, of course, I think it's a little bit obvious if you read between the lines, but what I found interesting about when they did the whole assault scene is how they discussed how different it is when a man rapes a woman versus how when a woman rapes a woman, because even all of the hate comments that she got, they were even hating on her for, like, you know, being a rapist. They were hating on her for being gay. Like, that's what really gets you, is that all the comments were about her being gay. Like, they weren't praying for her because, oh, you're a rapist. They were praying because the sin she committed was being gay. And you kind of start to notice this throughout the series of, like, oh my God, like, Natalie's never trying to get the attention of men. She's always getting the attention of women. Like, she cares about the validation of women, not the validation of men, which most women who act like her would be caring about. She doesn't care about how men perceive her. She cares about how women perceive her. Do women perceive her as perfect? Do women perceive her as kind? And it really makes you wonder, like, what type of internalized homophobia does this bitch have? If I had a nickel for each time I perceive media where two of the characters could easily have resolved their issues if they just acknowledged their sexuality, I'd have 2 nickels. Okay, that's the Amazing Digital Circus, and now this book, because this shit is crazy. I am so glad that I was able to get my friend involved with trying to read this book, because she asked me for the title again, because I had told her about the book, and now she asked for it again. So I think she's actually going to go through it reading it, and I'm really excited to see what she thinks about it so that we can talk about it. I really hope she gets into it soon. But give me 1 second, let me find the scene, because it really is an interesting one. Okay, so this is the scene beforehand. So again, this is basically the catalyst for everything that happened and reveals the big twist that we've been waiting on. So here is the portion where, you know, Natalie discusses that aspect, which I found interesting, and I'm surprised more people don't really talk about it. Oh yeah, and another thing, as you can see, everything is disjointed because I didn't write a script for this originally. But I found it interesting how there's multiple multiple times where they talk about like, oh yes, the labor of women back in the day as pioneers. But the thing is, back in the pioneer days, women would also just pretend the whole thing. Now granted, people talked about how, it wasn't historically accurate, but there is a reason why it's not historically accurate to the pioneer days, and we'll get into that pretty soon. But one interesting aspect is how basically in this time period, and again, it makes sense because of the twist, but back in this time period, white women would bring slaves with them to help them with the housework. This myth about like white women back in the day having to, scrub and toil and trouble and do this, that, and the other is really just that, a myth. Many of them brought their slaves over or had slaves that, helped them do the work for like a very cheap cost. Even though technically the religion of the time said that all women should just stay at the home and not work, many of these black women had to work and, ignore religious doctrine because that was the only thing they could do. If they didn't have a husband, then they had to work. And so they would work for these white women and basically do the pretend labor that these white women would perpetuate, like, oh yes, I do this, that, and the other, which I think perfectly matches Natalie as well, because Natalie, being straight up, she just uses help from other people. Like, she talks about how like, oh yeah, I do it all myself, but she doesn't. She has two nannies that obviously seem to be Hispanic as well. If not Mexican, they seem to be Hispanic. And another interesting thing is how they do the homeschooling, because the homeschooling aspect, I wish they had gotten more into it, but it's so obvious that these children were not homeschooled well at all. You want to know just how bad it is? Clementine was around 12 years old, right? Clementine's around 12 at this point when she's with Shannon, because Shannon's the one that's like introducing Clementine to this world. And in fact, Clementine was like taking videos of her mom when she was having these lash outs. Like, she goes on a whole spiel like at the very beginning of the book when she first saw her old high school classmate about like, oh, Vanessa, this, that, and the other, she's such a bitch, she's such a this, she's just a that. And before she decides, okay, let me film me and my girls going to Target. So Clementine filmed that because Shannon gave Clementine a phone, which technically she wasn't supposed to do, but she gave Clementine a phone so that Clementine can look up a whole bunch of different stuff. And Clementine was something else, always there to humble her mother. But Clementine was 12 years old and didn't know the difference between the ocean and the sea. The ocean and a river. Clementine didn't know the difference between an ocean and a river. 12 years old, couldn't tell the difference between an ocean and a river. She thought that the river and the ocean were the same thing. She couldn't even name the 4 major oceans. Not even Natalie could name the 4 major oceans. In fact, she literally stops at the 4th one. She's just like, yeah, honey, the oceans, the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian, and she can't remember what the last one is. Even though, and it's like, what type of homeschooling are these people doing? And again, malicious incompetence from Caleb. I can't wait to talk about this twist, because once we get to that twist, y'all are gonna understand where I'm coming from. But now to read the scene where, Natalie talks about it. So, if only my husband had raped our producer. That was basically what Doug said that night. What he roared for hours and hours while a rotating cast of side characters, me, then Amelia, which is Caleb's mother, and then finally just the lawyer, stared numbly at nothing. If only this stupid little son had raped our stupid little producer. If that had happened, it would have been over with and forgotten in 2 weeks. But a predatory woman? Unthinkable. A good Christian mother and wife who allegedly found other women attractive, who took what she wanted without asking? Kill the witch. Burn her. And she's not even wrong in that analysis either, because let's be honest with ourselves here. If a guy rapes a girl, she's right. Within 2 weeks, it's forgotten. But women, listen, if the producer was a guy, honestly, I think Natalie would have been able to get away with it. Like, if the producer was a man, I honestly do think that Natalie could have gotten away with it, because when it comes to men being raped, no one gives a shit about a man getting raped. As cruel as what I said is, it's true. Think about it. When men get raped, it's considered like oh yeah, man, you lost your V card. You, like, a lot of men don't register being raped by women as like being like rape, even though that's what it is. Like, go hear men like describe like, oh yeah, my teacher did this to me when I was like a teenager, and it's like, dude, that's assault. That's not good. And they're just like, It's not. And it's like, it's not, honey. It's not. Why would you think that that's good? That's not good. That's not good at all. It's really sad. But the thing is, women can kind of get away with being predators because, you know, society doesn't care about like female predators. Like when I was watching Desperate Housewives, I was surprised by how many people overlooked the fact that Gabriella was raping a kid. So many people ignore that aspect of Coco, not right now. Oh, your nails are sharp. But so many people ignore that about Gabriella's character. Like, so many people are just like, oh yeah, she's the baddie, she's the model, she's the this, she's the that. But then when I bring up the fact that she technically would have like 5 counts of statutory rape, all of a sudden I'm the bummer. I'm the one bringing down the vibe. Like, you know, as bad as her other friends were, none of her other friends were committing statutory rape. In fact, all of her friends had kids as well. Like, and then when she suffers like consequences for this, they're supposed to make us feel bad for her. Like, look, Gabriella can't adopt kids because one of the people at the adoption agency was the mother of the kid that she sexually assaulted, and I'm supposed to feel bad for that? She was literally having sex with a boy that was the same age as her friend's daughter. In fact, her friend's daughter is literally friends with the boy she was raping. And I'm supposed to feel bad for that, and everyone seems to forget it too, and everyone treats it like it's a joke. Like, no, it's not a joke. She's a fucking predator. You know, at the very least, when your husband cheated on you, at least when he cheated on you with like an actual grown-ass woman. Like, what about you? You were having sex with a 16-year-old boy, and now we're supposed to act as if you suffering consequences for doing it. Like, you should just be happy that your ass didn't go to jail and all you got was like her not saying anything. In fact, your friend almost got accused of sleeping with that kid instead of you, and you're acting as if you're this big victim. But yeah, if like Natalie had sex, like if the producer was a guy and she had, you know, raped him, I honestly think she would have gotten away with it much better. But because the producer is a woman and Natalie is a woman, then guess what? It was worse. Like, that's what I said. That's what I meant. It's like, people care more about the fact that she is gay. They didn't care that she raped somebody, right? They cared that she was a lesbian. Or at the very least, that her raping that woman gives her the impression of being a lesbian. And I do think that there's some sort of underlying sexuality issue that Natalie does have because, again, she constantly seeks the validation of women over men. She constantly mentions women in a more sexual light than she does men. She does not like having sex with her husband, though granted, her husband also can't have sex for shit. So that's that. But it really does make you think to yourself, like, yeah, she's not completely wrong. They didn't care that she raped that woman. They cared that she was a woman with another woman. And that's what all the comments were saying. All of them were telling her to go to hell, calling her a stupid bitch, not because she was a rapist, but because she was gay. Literally, all the comments were about her like, I'm gonna slit your throat in the middle of the night, you stupid fucking lesbo bitch. I will pray to God for your horrible sins of being gay, not for raping somebody. You will burn in hell for this. Again, not for the rape, which is in the 10 Commandments, but because she is gay. Disgusting faggot bitch. Like, none of this is from her raping a woman. Not only raping a woman, but raping like a very young woman. Natalie's in her 30s. This girl is like in her 20s by the time this happens. So her early 20s, mind you, like just recently turned drinking age. So I'm technically older than Shannon is in this story. So what does that say? Like, it's not about the rape. It's about the fact that she's a lesbian, or at the very least perceived to be a lesbian from assaulting another woman as a woman, which gets her so much outrage, which I find to be something. Really, truthfully, something. So now, let's get into the actual twist, because now that we know about the assault, that's where the twist happens. So, what is this twist? Natalie finds a neighbor's house and sees that this neighbor has a truck. And she's like really confused by this. She's like, how do you have a truck? She enters in there and it's filled with a bunch of like recent technology, right? Like, he's watching a TV, he's drinking a beer. The dude, she's just like, I need a doctor. And he's like, the guy, he turns around and she's just like, it's the same guy from who was helping Caleb fix the fence. And he was like, mom? And then you're like, mom? Why are you calling her mom? And then she's just like, I need a doctor. Like, and she just keeps repeating it. She's like super exhausted. She's tired. And he's just like, mom? Again, like he keeps calling her mom. And then she just runs out of the house. And then she gets back there and she isn't able to get the medicine. And that's when things take a turn, because then a red car drives into the ranch. And then we see Clementine, fully grown up, like possibly in her early 20s. Fully grown up, and she's just like, yeah, I'm here to talk with you guys. And that's when the twist happens. Turns out, this is not the past. This is the future. In fact, Natalie is 50 years old. Also, this was something I forgot to mention. At some point, Natalie mentions the fact that she had sex with Caleb, and then she realizes that she hasn't gotten her period. So she starts to realize, she's like, oh my God, I must be pregnant again. So yeah, it gets really interesting at this point. So it turns out they weren't actually, in the past. What actually happened is that they're in the future. So Natalie basically makes the plan where, okay, we're just going to completely live in the past. Like, we're going to completely, like, get rid of microwaves, no more TVs, no more this, no more that. She basically rips her house apart of any modernity ever. Like, it gets really, really crazy. Like, they get rid of their phones, they get rid of their cable, they get rid of everything. And this is when Clementine and her first set of kids are still, like, there. And, it gets really, really bad. And she, like, Doug agrees to this. He's just like, okay, I'll pay all the legal fees and everything like that, and you guys can just live here. She buys Pioneer clothes off of Amazon so that they can live in this pretend reality. And you would think to yourself, why does Caleb go through with this? And it's like, because Caleb, again, is maliciously incompetent. Really, truthfully, Caleb just wants to do nothing. Okay, that's it. Caleb is just lazy. He's spiritually a lazy person. The dude has no aspirations in life. He just wants to be lazy. He just wants to be told what to do. And so he's perfectly fine with living in this pretend reality so that they can escape their problems instead of actually facing them head on. Like, he's just a very spiritually low-willed person. So he automatically just goes with whatever his wife says, because really, truthfully, he doesn't know what to do with himself. Even Natalie said herself, he's just like, I have a man with the spirituality of a woman, basically. She's just like, my husband is a man in the... How does she describe it again? She basically says that she's a man in the body of a woman, and her husband is a woman in the body of a man. Like, he doesn't act like how a man is supposed to act. Quotation marks. But Clementine comes in. She's fully grown. Again, this is all in the future. All of it. Natalie is now 50 years old. This is 20 years in the future now. Which means Caleb is now in his, like, mid-50s too. These are their new sets of kids. Clementine, at a certain point, when Clementine turned 16, she basically ran off with her siblings to go to their grandmother's house because her parents just... more specifically, Natalie. Natalie basically had an entire psychotic break, and that's how so much of this happened. She had a psychotic break. She basically took everything down, and they were just like, yep, we officially are living in the pioneer times. Because I guess living in the pioneer times was better than, like, facing your actual problems and the fact that you assaulted somebody. But hey, that's what she wanted to do. It was a purgatory of her own creation, a hell of her own making. This is like a Macbeth level tragedy. Like, her psychosis finally caught the best of her, and she just made her own fucking hell. She is constantly, like, going through it mentally, and turns out, like, they're getting pills sometimes to suppress her. Like, they have to ration out the pills, but they use the pills to, like, help her calm her down. And it turns out their sons just live close by. Their one son, Stetson, and their other son, Samuel. So Samuel brings them pills to, like, keep her calm so she's not acting crazy. And in fact, her acting crazy by going to, like, the one son's house, Stetson's house, to try and get help for Maeve, is what, like, finally sealed the nail into the coffin, because he calls up his sister and he's just like, listen, our mom just came here rambling like a crazy woman about a doctor and then ran into the woods. I don't know what the fuck's going on with her. She's really, really lost it. So it's like, you see what I mean when I said that Caleb is maliciously incompetent? Because he knows that that girl, Maeve, is unvaccinated, right? And that his wife injured herself severely. Keep in mind, they don't even grow food. The farm doesn't grow food at all. So their sons have been bringing them food to keep them alive. And keep in mind that Doug thought that they were going off the deep end too, because they sold their car and then they started building an outhouse, and Doug was like, oh yeah, you guys have lost your mind, I'm gone. My thing is, I don't know why Doug didn't cut them off sooner. It's like, dude, why were you still paying them off? Because that's what like Clementine said basically. It's like, yeah, I had to wait until granddad ran out of money so that I could finally get a warrant on you guys so I could take the children away from you. Also, are you guys not family? Couldn't you guys just bum rush these people and like take the children? Like, I feel like there should be specific laws in place where if the parents are incompetent, that families should be able to take the kids without feeling consequences. I mean, when it comes to social services, that's a completely different thing. But I feel like if it's family coming to retrieve family from obviously unwell individuals, it shouldn't be an issue. But you see, Caleb is so malicious because your wife could have gotten an infection and you weren't going to tell your sons that your wife severely hurt herself and needed to get medical attention. Your child was getting severely sick, was sick with a fever for days on end, and you could have gone to your sons, because he does that. That's what he's doing every day. When he leaves to go into the forest, he literally just goes to like drink beers and watch football with his son. And you didn't think that maybe you should have asked your son if he could like get some NyQuil or something for your sick daughter? We also find out that Natalie's in menopause because she's 50. And not only that, Maeve, the little girl who talks like she's 4 years old, is 10. Because when Natalie had her home birth with Maeve, she couldn't breathe. Maeve went without oxygen for an extended period of time, and Natalie and Caleb had no idea what to do, and since they didn't have a cell phone or anything, they couldn't call for help. If it wasn't for Mary deciding, okay, I'm going to like breathe into my little sister's mouth, then Maeve would have died. This shit that's why I wanted to talk about this book, because that is a crazy fucking twist. That's such a crazy fucking twist. Not just that this is like a hell of her own creation, not just the fact that, you know, this wasn't in the past at all, but it's like all of this was fake. Like, they had these kids living like the Amish, and even the Amish take their kids out to the modern world every so often. They have like a whole ritual for it, where they have their kids go to the modern world for a few days, and then if they like it, they let them stay there. So like, even the Amish do a better job at this shit than they did. Like, this is fucking insane shit to think about. Like, every time I think about it, it's insane. And it turns out that the thing that Mary saw in the woods was Clementine trying to get them help. I just think that it's so crazy to like really think about it. Like, she's just fully crazy. She's just crazy. And then you think about what Caleb did, and it's just like, this motherfucker is sick. He's actually fucking sick. The thing that gets me too, though, is like the sons should have done a bit more, honestly. Like, I feel like the sons should have been coming to check on their parents way more than they did, especially considering the fact that it's so obvious that both their mother and, even though their dad is a lot more clear-headed, he's still a little bit crazy. But like, your mom is like super, super crazy, and it's like, I get it, she's a fucking bitch, but it's like, really? Your mom is like showing these very obvious signs of being like a schizophrenic or something, to the point where you have to buy her pills to keep her docile, and you didn't think to yourself at some point, yeah, you know what, maybe we should remove both mom and the kids from dad. Dad kind of sucks. I mean, he's like 55, both of you are like in your early 20s. You could easily fuck his shit up. Y'all could easily fuck his shit up. Like, damn, no one tried to like, I get it that Doug was like paying off for like the lawyer fees and everything, but it's like, really, truthfully, guys, you're telling me that at no point none of y'all could have like bum rush these people? I think you could have bum rushed them. It's like 2 people. Like, you guys have like, what, even the 3 eldest kids, that's enough to bum rush, okay? Adding in like maybe getting someone from your family too, like they could have gotten help from their cousins. They have like 5 cousins that they could have relied on to like help them bum rush their parents and get those kids out of there sooner. Like, the fact that these kids had to live life like this for so long is just genuinely sad. But then, you know, Natalie starts to have like this clarity moment where she's just like, you know what, let's just leave this fucking farm. Like, we should have left. We should have gotten divorced a long time ago. Anyway, 5 years into the future, Mary should be about like 18, early 20s at this point. You know, she gets to live in Santa Monica with her sister Clementine. Everything is like way better now. And you know, Natalie, she's in jail. She's probably never going to get out. She's going to probably die in there. She's 50 and she's serving a 30-year sentence. And she still thinks about Rena. In fact, she wanted Rena to do the interview for her because they wanted to do an interview. And it's still obvious that her mind is not there mentally because they literally drove her to her old house at the ranch. And she's just like, oh, this is not my house. This isn't my house. And then the producer lady is just like, this is your house. We literally drove here. This is your house. How could this not be your house? So like Natalie is still obviously not all there, but you know, Rena does the interview. Natalie is still incredibly condescending, and turns out there is a whole book. You're just gonna lie down on my camera and make a chick. But anyway, it turns out Mary made a whole book about her experience as like basically being this parentified daughter who had to basically live this pretend life on the Pioneer because both of her parents couldn't live life like regular people. And it was so interesting. And I won't lie, I need the author of Yesteryear to put out that Book of Mary book because I know that that book is crazy. Like, could you imagine because again, like I said, Caleb let his wife step into a bear trap and then never got proper medicine for her. Because the medicines that they're using are fake, okay? It's literally just syrup, okay? It's just regular cherry syrup and stuff. They're fake. They're fake medicines. They don't do anything for real. So you're having your child give your wife and then your sick kid fake medicine, knowing that it's fake, but also knowing that you could literally go to your son and ask him to get real medicine and you choose not to. This dude is when I say maliciously incompetent, I mean maliciously incompetent. Like, that was malicious. There's so much that but yeah, this was a 4-star read for me. I think it was a very good book. I know a lot of people didn't like it. I do think that there were some aspects that could have been looked more into, but thank you so much for watching this impromptu video because this really was impromptu. I really was not going to do a video on this until I ended up finishing it and I was just like, yeah, no, I gotta talk about this. So now, next book on the docket is The Secret World of Briar Rose by Sydney Pham. I'm going to see if Read with Sydney can really talk the shit that she dishes out. I read the first chapter, it's really good, so I think I'm really gonna like this book. But thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, because if you subscribe, if I get 15,000 followers before I release my book, then I will cosplay a character that you guys get to vote on for my author photo. Also, in very exciting news, I was mentioned on someone's YouTube channel. So Athena P mentioned me in her most latest YouTube video, and I'm so shocked that she mentioned my YouTube account, because when someone sent me the photo, I was just like, is that AI? Like, I had to look at it myself, and I was just like, oh my god, Athena P mentioned me in her latest video. I can't believe this. Like, this is so cool, and I'm really, really thankful. Thank you, Athena P, for doing that. So please like and subscribe, and also read my concepts for my original story on AO3. I'll have that link in my description. Thank you. Bye.